In 28 BC, Octavian was elected consul for the 6th time. However, unlike his previous consulships from 31 to 29 BC, Octavian gave Agrippa half of the fasces and gave an oath to the Senate that his consulship would be according to the laws of the Republic. This was the beginning of the first constitutional settlement that saw enormous changes to the position and powers of Octavian in the Roman Republic. Augustus Res Gestae 34 to 35. In my 6th and 7th consulships, after I had extinguished civil wars and through universal agreement had power over everything, I handed over to the state from my power to the decision of the Roman Senate and people. For this service of mine I was named Augustus by decree of the Senate, and the doorposts of my house were publicly adorned with bay leaves, and a civic crown was fixed over my door, and a golden shield was placed in the Curia Julia, which the Senate and the people of Rome gave me, as is attested by the inscription on this shield, on account of my courage, clemency, justice, and piety. After this time I excelled all in influence, although I had no greater power than the others who were my colleagues in each magistracy. The question is, why this sudden change? Clearly, after coming to some sort of decision, or maybe even agreement, the fact that he says in his Res Gestae that he gave up power through universal agreement indicates that it was with the approval of both the Senate and the people that he did this. He also acknowledged that before this settlement he had been all-powerful, but had given it up, as was in keeping with Republican tradition. He explains away the power that he had after this being in line with normal Republican magistracies, and that any additional power was down to his influence rather than some sort of official autocratic authority. This message he wanted to get across to the man in the street as well as the senators. In essence, Octavian gave up the pretense of having the power of the triumvirs, which had expired in 33 BC, and now held power in a legitimate position. The consulship, and that the normal functions of the Senate had resumed, such as the other consul having half of the lictors. Velleius Paterculus, a near contemporary of Augustus's, gave his opinion, a senatorial aristocrat's view of this settlement, to him. Velleius Paterculus, Short Roman History, Book 2, Chapter 89. The civil wars were ended after 20 years, foreign war suppressed, peace restored, the frenzy of arms everywhere lulled to rest, validity was restored to the laws, authority to the courts, and dignity to the Senate. The power of the magistrates was reduced to its former limits, with the sole exception that 2 were added to the 8 existing praetors. The old traditional form of the Republic was restored. Agriculture returned to the fields, respect to religion, to mankind freedom from anxiety, and to each citizen his property rights were now assured. Old laws were usefully amended, and new laws passed for the general good. The revision of the Senate, while not drastic, was not lacking in severity. The chief men of the state who had won triumphs and had held high office were at the invitation of Augustus induced to adorn the city. In the case of the consulship only, Caesar was not able to have his way, but was obliged to hold that office consecutively until the 11th time, in spite of his frequent efforts to prevent it. But the dictatorship, which the people persistently offered him, he as stubbornly refused. Again, we can pick out why this would have consolidated Octavian's position in legitimizing his power. The power of magistrates were restored to their previous level, except for the 2 extra praetors. Considering that the triumvirate had had upwards of 50 praetors, sundry suffect consuls and so on, here Octavian had clearly restored the normal running of the Republic, hence Paterculus saying the old traditional form of the Republic was restored. Also, there were no more prescriptions. If a man like Paterculus could have freedom from anxiety and property rights, then it is an assertion that people's property was not going to be confiscated by the triumvirs anymore. A similar tone of relief was shared by the Laudatio Torii in regards to the end of prescriptions. In Scriptorum Latinorum Scriptorum, 8393, section 2, line 25. When peace had been restored throughout the world and the Republic restored, we began to enjoy quiet and happy times. With the restoration of the Republic, the acts of the tyrannical triumvirate had to be undone. On the 1st of January 27 BC, all triumviral edicts were annulled. Tacitus, Annals, Book 3, Chapter 28. The Caesar Augustus, in his 6th consulship, his power assured, cancelled his edicts as triumvir, and laid down the terms for us to have peace and principate. Coins were minted with the legend, laws and rights of the Roman people restored. In addition to these many honours and the restoration of the officers of the Republic, Octavian was given a new name. The Senate originally wanted him to take the name Romulus, which he himself quite liked, as a second founder of the city. This had its problems, since Romulus was a king, exactly what Augustus was trying not to look like. Also, in one version of Romulus's death, he was torn apart by the Senate. One can imagine some old senator reminding Augustus, "If you act like Romulus, you will suffer the fate of Romulus." Instead, Mantius Plancus suggested that he should be called Augustus, because it was new and sacred, and consecrated places which had had augural rites performed were called august. This was much better, as it had no connection to tyranny. This also explains why Augustus refused the dictatorship. It would likely bring up unsavoury memories of Julius Caesar. Most importantly, the Senate asked him to hold imperium over the provinces. Augustus refused and said he would only have the provinces that were turbulent or near the frontiers. He was thus voted imperium over these lands for 10 years. He had control of Gaul, Spain, Syria, Egypt, Cyprus, and Cilicia. He later received Illyricum from the control of the Senate. He added to the empire Dalmatia, Galatia, Judea, Pannonia, Moesia, Raetia, and Noricum. The public provinces were Sicily, Sardinia and Corsica, Africa, Cyrene and Crete, Asia, Bithynia and Pontus, Macedonia, and Achaea. Illyricum until Augustus was given control, as well as Illyricum until Augustus was given control of it. Augustus, once he had finished with them, returned Cyprus, southern Spain, and southern Gaul to the control of the Senate. This asserted Augustus's military dominance, as he now had control of the provinces with the most soldiers. So the main points of this settlement were the repeal of triumviral laws and powers, imperium of a large province for 10 years for Augustus, Octavian changed his name to Augustus, new buildings including the tomb of the Julii and Augustus's house on the Palatine Hill with a temple to Apollo inside were built in 28 and 27 BC respectively. Games were held and he cancelled debts to the treasury prior to Actium. He was chosen Princeps Senatus, that is, he could speak first in the Senate. He was consul, he held a census, he was voted honours. He doubled the pay of his bodyguards and paid out money to senators and paid for free grain for the people. Had Augustus resigned his power as he claimed? The answer to this is no. He was the leading man in the state and effectively all-powerful. However, his powers now came from good republican officers and traditions rather than the extraordinary and tyrannical. I have been your host, Daniel Maynard. Be sure to like, subscribe and share this video, and this has been Eastern Roman History.